The gunshot that echoed through Wade Mason's heart on that bitter February morning of 1878 had long since faded from the air, but the wound it left behind still bled freely. 3 years had passed since he'd laid Elizabeth in that lonely plot of prairie soil, yet the sound of the funeral dirge still haunted his dreams each night. Wade stood on the weathered porch of his ranch house, 30 miles outside of Sweetwater, Texas, watching the setting sun paint the vast expanse of his cattle land in hues of amber and gold. The beauty was wasted on him. His calloused hand absently stroked the stubble on his jaw as his eyes drifted to the small grave marker visible on the distant hill, a daily ritual of self-torment that had become as natural to him as breathing. "Evenin's gettin' chilly," muttered Tobias, his ranch foreman, climbing the steps to join him. "Cattle are settled for the night." Wade merely nodded, not bothering to shift his gaze. "Been 3 years, Wade," Tobias said softly, following his employer's line of sight. "Might be time to—" "Don't," Wade cut him off, his voice carrying the edge of a blade. "Just don't." Tobias sighed, knowing better than to push. "Supply wagons comin' tomorrow. Need anything from town?" "Just the usual," Wade replied, finally turning away from the grave to face his longtime friend. At 32, Wade's face had hardened into permanent lines of grief, his once bright blue eyes now the color of a stormy sky. The promising young rancher who'd once been known for his easy laugh was buried somewhere beneath the hardened shell he'd become. "You might consider coming along," Tobias suggested cautiously. "Get off this ranch for a spell. Martha Dawson's been asking after you." Wade's jaw tightened. "I've got work to do here." "All work and no—" "I said no, Tobias," Wade snapped, turning to go inside. "I've no interest in Martha Dawson or any other woman. That chapter of my life is closed." Later that night, Wade sat alone at his kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey his only companion. The house built with his own hands for Elizabeth, designed to be filled with children and laughter, now echoed with emptiness. The silence was both his punishment and his refuge. He poured another drink, remembering the day he'd met Elizabeth. She'd been the schoolteacher, newly arrived from Boston, bringing books and cultured speech to their rough frontier town. He'd been smitten from the first moment she'd fixed those intelligent green eyes on him. Their courtship had been swift, their marriage filled with dreams of building something lasting in this wild country. Then came the fever that swept through the territory, claiming Elizabeth and their unborn child in the span of 3 cruel days. Wade drained his glass, welcoming the burn. He'd made his peace with solitude. The ranch was enough. The cattle were enough. The memory of Elizabeth would have to be enough. The following evening, after a grueling day breaking a new stallion, Wade dragged his aching body up the porch steps as the last light faded from the sky. His muscles protested each movement, but the physical pain was a welcome distraction from the familiar ache in his chest. He had just reached for the door handle when he heard it, a sound so unexpected it froze him in place. A knock, faint but unmistakable, coming from the front door. Frowning, Wade turned. Tobias never knocked and no one else ever visited. His hand instinctively moved to the revolver at his hip as he approached the door. "Who's there?" he called out, voice rough from disuse. No answer came, just another soft knock. Slowly, Wade unlatched the door and pulled it open, the hinges groaning in protest. The lantern light from inside spilled out onto the porch, illuminating a sight that sent his world tilting sideways. Standing before him was a woman, thin and travel-worn, her face half hidden by the shadows. In her arms, wrapped in a faded blanket, was a small bundle that stirred and made a soft mewling sound. "Hello, Wade," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The lantern light caught her face as she stepped forward, and Wade felt his breath leave his body in a rush. Those eyes, he knew those eyes. They had haunted his dreams for 3 long years. "Elizabeth," he whispered, his voice breaking on the name. The woman shook her head slowly, a sad smile crossing her exhausted face. "No, I'm Hannah. Hannah Mason. Elizabeth's sister." Wade's mind reeled, struggling to process her words. Elizabeth had mentioned a sister once or twice, but they'd never met. She'd been estranged from her family when she'd chosen to marry a rancher and move west. "That's not possible," he said finally, his grip tightening on the doorframe. "Elizabeth never, may I come in?" Hannah interrupted, swaying slightly on her feet. "It's been a long journey and the baby needs to be fed." The word baby snapped Wade from his shock. His eyes dropped to the bundle in her arms, which chose that moment to let out a more insistent cry. Without another word, he stepped back, holding the door open. Hannah entered, her steps unsteady. As she passed him, the lamplight fully illuminated her face, and Wade felt his heart constrict. The resemblance to Elizabeth was uncanny, the same delicate nose, the same curve of the jaw. But where Elizabeth's hair had been a warm chestnut, Hannah's was a darker shade, nearly black in the dim light. And her eyes, though the same striking green, held a wariness that Elizabeth's had never shown. "Sit," Wade ordered gruffly, gesturing to the kitchen table. "I'll fetch some water." Hannah sank gratefully into a chair, cradling the now fussing infant against her chest. "S.H. Lily," she murmured. "It's all right now." Wade returned with a cup of water, which Hannah accepted with trembling hands. He watched as she drank deeply, then shifted the baby to better see its face. A little girl, he realized, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that punched angrily at the air. "Why are you here?" he asked, remaining standing, keeping his distance from this apparition that had appeared on his doorstep. Hannah set down the cup, her green eyes meeting his. "Elizabeth wrote to me before she died. I only received the letter 3 months ago. I've been trying to reach you ever since." Wade's throat tightened. "That doesn't explain why you're here or why you have a baby with you." Hannah's gaze dropped to the child in her arms. "This is Lily." She's yours, Wade." The room seemed to tilt beneath Wade's feet. "That's not possible," he said, his voice strangely calm despite the roaring in his ears. "Elizabeth died. Our baby died with her." "No," Hannah said softly. "Elizabeth was carrying twins." She didn't know, the doctor didn't know. When the fever took her, they tried to save the babies. One didn't survive, but Lily did. She was so small, so fragile. The doctor didn't think she would make it through the night. Wade shook his head, disbelief and anger rising within him. "That's a lie." "I buried my wife and child. I would have known if you were out of your mind with grief," Hannah interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "The doctor tried to tell you, but you wouldn't listen. You rode out that night and didn't return for days." By then, he had sent Lily to the mission hospital in Fort Worth. He wrote to my parents, telling them about Elizabeth and the surviving baby. Wade stared at her, memories of those dark days swimming in his mind. It was true, he had barely been conscious of his surroundings after Elizabeth's death. He remembered the funeral in fragments, like pieces of a broken mirror. He had indeed disappeared afterward, riding blindly into the wilderness, half hoping the elements would take him too. "My parents couldn't travel west," Hannah continued. "They sent me to collect Lily and bring her back to Boston. But when I reached Fort Worth and saw her," her voice faltered. "She has Elizabeth's smile, Wade, and your eyes. I couldn't take her away from where she belongs." As if on cue, the baby turned her face toward Wade, revealing eyes the color of a summer sky. His eyes. Something cracked inside him, a fissure in the wall he'd built around his heart. "Why now?" he managed to ask. "Why wait nearly 3 years?" Hannah's face darkened. "I didn't wait." As soon as I found Lily, I tried to reach you. But when I arrived in Sweetwater, I learned you'd left town, moved to this remote ranch. No one would tell me exactly where. Then I ran into some trouble." She hesitated, clearly unwilling to elaborate. "It took me longer than I expected to find you. Much longer." Wade studied her face, noting the shadows beneath her eyes, the wary set of her shoulders. She was hiding something, that much was clear. But the baby in her arms Lily had quieted, her tiny hand wrapped around one of Hannah's fingers, her eyes drooping with exhaustion. "You must be tired," he said finally, the words feeling strange in his mouth, the first words of hospitality he'd offered anyone in years. "There's a room down the hall. You can stay there tonight. We'll figure the rest out in the morning." Relief washed over Hannah's face. "Thank you," she whispered. Wade showed her to the small guest room, bringing in fresh water and towels. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, watching as Hannah settled the baby on the bed, surrounding her with pillows to prevent her from rolling off. "She's beautiful," he found himself saying, the words escaping before he could stop them. Hannah looked up, a genuine smile softening her tired features. She's strong too, like her father." Wade felt something twist in his chest. "I'll leave you to rest," he said abruptly, turning to go. "Wade," Hannah called after him. He paused but didn't turn around. "Thank you for not turning us away." He gave a curt nod and left, closing the door behind him. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall, his mind reeling with the night's revelations. A daughter. He had a daughter. Elizabeth's daughter. The child he thought he'd lost was sleeping just a few feet away. Wade made his way back to the kitchen and reached for the whiskey bottle, then stopped. Instead, he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. For the first time in 3 years, he felt the wall around his heart begin to crumble, and with it came the return of a feeling he'd thought long dead: hope. The sound of a baby's cry woke Wade before dawn. For a moment, he lay in bed, disoriented, convinced he'd dreamed the entire encounter. Then he heard soft footsteps in the hallway and a gentle voice murmuring comforting words. He rose and dressed quickly, following the sounds to the kitchen. Hannah stood by the window, rocking Lily in her arms as the first pale light of dawn filtered through the glass. She had changed into a simple blue dress, her dark hair pulled back in a loose braid. She looked less like a ghost and more like a flesh and blood woman in the morning light. "She's hungry," Hannah explained without turning around. "I didn't mean to wake you." Wade moved to the stove. "I'll make coffee. There's milk in the spring house if she drinks it." "She does, thank you," Hannah replied, turning to face him. The wariness in her eyes had softened but not disappeared entirely. Wade busied himself with the coffee and breakfast preparations, stealing glances at the woman and child. In the clearer light of morning, he could see the differences between Hannah and Elizabeth more distinctly. Hannah's features were sharper, her frame more angular. Where Elizabeth had moved with graceful confidence, Hannah carried herself with a cautious vigilance, like someone accustomed to watching her back. As for Lily, the resemblance to both Elizabeth and himself was unmistakable. The shape of her face, the determined set of her little jaw, all Elizabeth. But those eyes unmistakably his own. "How old is she exactly?" he asked, setting a cup of coffee before Hannah. 29 months, Hannah answered, shifting Lily to her hip. "She was born on May 15, 1876. The date hit Wade like a physical blow, 3 months after Elizabeth's death. He had indeed buried his wife while his daughter fought for life in another town. The thought made him sick with guilt and grief. "She walks and talks some," Hannah continued, seemingly unaware of his internal struggle. "She's quite bright." As if to demonstrate, Lily looked directly at Wade and said clearly, "Hungry." Despite himself, Wade felt his lips twitch toward a smile. Well, let's fix that, little one. After breakfast, during which Lily had stared at Wade with unabashed curiosity while messily devouring her porridge, Hannah explained more of their journey. "I was in Fort Worth for several months," she said, cleaning Lily's face with a damp cloth. "The mission sisters were kind, but they couldn't keep us indefinitely. I tried writing to you, but my letters were returned." Wade nodded. He'd instructed the postmaster to return all mail after too many condolence letters had arrived from well-meaning townspeople. "When I finally had enough money saved for the journey to Sweetwater, I discovered you'd sold your property in town. No one seemed willing to tell me where you'd gone. I think they were protecting you. Tobias," Wade said quietly, "my foreman. He would have told them to keep quiet about me." Hannah nodded. "Eventually, I met a man who said he could take me to you. He seemed kind at first, offering to escort Lily and me safely, but his intentions—" She trailed off, her eyes darkening with the memory. "Let's just say he wasn't the gentleman he pretended to be." Wade's hands clenched into fists. "Did he hurt you?" "No," Hannah said quickly. "But he took what little money I had left. I had to work odd jobs in various towns for months to earn enough to continue searching for you." Wade studied her face, seeing the truth of her ordeal written in the shadows beneath her eyes and the wariness that never fully left her gaze. "I'm sorry," he said, surprised to find he meant it. Hannah shrugged, a gesture that reminded him painfully of Elizabeth. "It's not your fault. The important thing is that we found you." Before Wade could respond, the sound of hoofbeats approached the house. Instantly, Hannah tensed, gathering Lily protectively against her chest. "It's just Tobias," Wade assured her, moving to the window. "My foreman." Sure enough, Tobias's familiar figure came into view as he dismounted and approached the house. Wade met him on the porch, closing the door behind him. "Mornin'," Tobias began, then stopped, noticing Wade's expression. "Something happened." Wade leaned against the porch railing, struggling to find the words to explain the night's events. "I had visitors last night." Tobias raised an eyebrow. "Visitors out here?" Elizabeth's sister, Wade said, the words still strange on his tongue. She brought my daughter." Tobias stared at him, mouth agape. "You're what now?" Wade explained Hannah's story as best he could. When he finished, Tobias removed his hat, running a hand through his graying hair. "Well, I'll be damned," he said finally. "You believe her?" Wade nodded slowly. "The baby has my eyes, Tobias. And she looks like Elizabeth. Besides, what would be the point of such an elaborate lie?" "Money," Tobias suggested. "This ranch is worth something now." Wade shook his head. "She didn't ask for anything, just shelter for the night." Tobias regarded him thoughtfully. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," Wade admitted, the truth of his uncertainty settling heavily on his shoulders. "I need time to think." "Well," Tobias said, replacing his hat, "I came to tell you we've got that broken fence in the north pasture that needs fixing, but I reckon I can handle it with the boys." Wade nodded gratefully. "I'd appreciate that." After Tobias left, Wade returned to the kitchen to find Hannah washing dishes while Lily played with a wooden spoon on the floor. "Your foreman?" Hannah asked, glancing up from her task. "Yes, Tobias has been with me since I started this ranch." Hannah nodded, returning to the dishes. "He seems protective of you." "He is," Wade agreed, watching Lily bang the spoon enthusiastically against the floor. "Like family." The word hung in the air between them. Family. Something Wade had convinced himself he would never have again. "I should help with the ranch work," he said abruptly, uncomfortable with the direction of his thoughts. "Will you be all right here?" Hannah gave him a measured look. "We'll be fine. We've managed on our own for quite some time." There was a quiet dignity in her words that stirred something in Wade respect, perhaps. He nodded and headed for the door, pausing only when a small voice called out, "Bye." He turned to see Lily waving the wooden spoon at him, a wide grin on her face. Despite himself, Wade felt his lips curve into a small smile. "Bye, little one," he replied softly, before heading out into the bright Texas morning. The day passed in a blur of physical labor as Wade threw himself into ranch work, trying to process the upheaval in his life. By late afternoon, he found himself in the barn, brushing down his stallion with more vigor than necessary. "Thought I might find you hiding out here," came Tobias's voice from the barn door. Wade didn't look up. "I'm not hiding." "Sure you are," Tobias replied, leaning against a post. "Can't say I blame you, it's a lot to take in." Wade continued brushing, his strokes becoming more measured. "She says the baby is mine, that Elizabeth was carrying twins. And you believe her?" Wade paused, considering. "I don't know what to believe, but the child." He trailed off, remembering Lily's clear blue eyes. "She has my eyes, Tobias." Tobias nodded slowly. "Then she's yours. Question is, what now?" Wade set down the brush, finally meeting his friend's gaze. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are they staying? Are you sending them away?" "What's your plan here, Wade?" The questions hit Wade like physical blows. He hadn't thought beyond the immediate shock of Hannah's arrival. "I don't know," he admitted. "The child is mine if Hannah's telling the truth. I have a responsibility." "And the sister?" Tobias pressed. "Elizabeth's sister. What about her?" Wade frowned, uncertain why Tobias seemed so focused on Hannah. "What about her?" Tobias shrugged, a knowing look in his eyes. "Just wondering where she fits in this new family picture." "There is no family picture," Wade said sharply. "The woman brought my child to me. That's all." "If you say so," Tobias replied, clearly unconvinced. "But I saw the way you looked at her when you came out to meet me this morning. Been a long time since I've seen that look on your face." Wade turned away, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "You're seeing things that aren't there, old man." Tobias chuckled, pushing away from the post. "Maybe so. But I've known you too long to be fooled, Wade Mason. Something's woken up inside you, and it ain't just fatherly feelings." Before Wade could respond, Tobias tipped his hat and left the barn, leaving Wade alone with thoughts he wasn't ready to acknowledge. When Wade finally returned to the house as the sun was setting, he found Hannah at the stove, stirring something that filled the kitchen with a savory aroma. Lily sat on a blanket on the floor, playing with what looked like a small rag doll. "I hope you don't mind," Hannah said, noticing his entrance. "I found some vegetables in your garden and made stew." The sight of someone cooking in his kitchen in Elizabeth's kitchen should have bothered him. Instead, Wade felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. "I don't mind," he said quietly. Lily looked up at the sound of his voice, her face lighting up with a smile that was pure Elizabeth. "Up," she demanded, raising her arms toward him. Wade froze, uncertain. Hannah watched him, her expression careful. "She wants you to pick her up," she explained gently. Wade hesitated, then moved to the child, bending awkwardly to lift her. Lily came willingly into his arms, her small body fitting against his chest as if she belonged there. She immediately grabbed at his beard with curious fingers. "Tickly," she declared, giggling. Something broke open inside Wade at the sound of that laughter so innocent, so free of the grief that had defined his existence for the past 3 years. Without thinking, he pressed his lips to the top of her head, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. Hannah watched the interaction, a soft smile playing at her lips. "She likes you," she observed, returning to her cooking. "She's just friendly," Wade replied, though he couldn't deny the surge of pride her words evoked. "No," Hannah said, shaking her head. "Lily is actually quite shy around strangers. She seems to know who you are." The thought that his daughter somehow recognized him, despite never having met him, filled Wade with a mixture of joy and sorrow. He had missed so much of her life already. "Tell me about her," he said, settling into a chair with Lily on his lap. "What does she like? What makes her laugh?" Hannah's face softened as she began to speak, sharing stories of Lily's first steps, her favorite foods, the way she loved to be sung to at bedtime. As she talked, Wade found himself watching Hannah as much as listening to her words. The animation in her face, the gentle cadence of her voice so different from Elizabeth's more refined speech, yet compelling in its own way. "She's stubborn," Hannah was saying, a fond smile curving her lips. "Once she sets her mind to something, there's no dissuading her. I wonder where she gets that from." The teasing note in her voice caught Wade off guard. "Elizabeth could be stubborn when she wanted to be," he said defensively. Hannah's eyebrows rose slightly. "I was thinking of you, actually. Elizabeth wrote about your mule-headed determination quite often in her letters." Wade felt a flush creep up his neck. "Oh," Hannah laughed, the sound unexpectedly melodious. "She meant it as a compliment, I think. She admired your strength of will." The mention of Elizabeth should have reopened the wound in Wade's heart, but somehow, hearing Hannah speak of her sister with such warmth made the pain more bearable. It was as if Elizabeth was still present, in the stories Hannah told and in the child on his lap. They ate dinner together, Lily insisting on sitting on Wade's knee rather than in the chair Hannah had prepared for her. The little girl alternated between feeding herself messily and offering Wade bites from her spoon, which he awkwardly accepted to her evident delight. After dinner, Hannah prepared to put Lily to bed. To Wade's surprise, the child reached for him, her small face serious. "Story," she demanded. Hannah looked apologetic. "I usually read to her before bed. I found a book on your shelf. I hope that was all right." Wade nodded, remembering the small collection of books Elizabeth had brought with her from Boston. He hadn't opened them since her death. "I can read to her," he offered, the words surprising him as much as Hannah. Hannah's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "That would be nice. I'll show you her bedtime routine." Wade followed Hannah to the guest room, where she had created a makeshift bed for Lily using pillows and blankets. He watched as Hannah gently washed the child's face and hands, changed her into a clean nightgown, and brushed her dark curls. "Now a story and then sleep," Hannah explained, handing Wade a small, worn book of children's tales. Wade sat awkwardly on the edge of the bed, opening the book to a random page. Lily immediately crawled into his lap, settling against his chest as if she'd done so 100 times before. The trust in the gesture nearly undid him. He began to read, his deep voice filling the small room with tales of talking animals and brave children. Lily listened intently, her small finger pointing at the illustrations, occasionally asking questions that Wade did his best to answer. By the time he finished the story, Lily's eyes were drooping. Hannah stepped forward, gently lifting the sleepy child and tucking her into the bed. "Good night, sweet girl," Hannah whispered, pressing a kiss to Lily's forehead. To Wade's surprise, Lily's eyes opened, fixing on him. "Papa kiss," she mumbled sleepily. Hannah glanced at Wade, uncertainty in her eyes. "I've told her about you," she explained quietly. "Shown her the drawing Elizabeth sent of you two together." Wade felt his throat tighten. Slowly, he leaned down and pressed his lips to his daughter's forehead. "Good night, Lily," he whispered. The child smiled contentedly, her eyes drifting closed. Wade followed Hannah out of the room, his emotions in turmoil. In the hallway, he stopped, needing to understand. "Why did you tell her about me?" he asked. "You didn't know if you'd ever find me." Hannah met his gaze steadily. "Because you're her father. She deserved to know that she had one, even if we never found you. And what will you tell her now?" Wade pressed. "Now that you have found me," Hannah's expression grew serious. "That depends on you, Wade, on what you want." The question hung between them, heavy with implication. What did he want? For 3 years, Wade had wanted nothing but to be left alone with his grief. Now, suddenly, he found himself with a daughter he never knew existed and a woman who looked at him with eyes that reminded him painfully of his lost love. "I don't know what I want," he admitted finally. "I need time." Hannah nodded, understanding in her gaze. "We have nowhere else to go, Wade. But we won't impose on you indefinitely. Just say the word and we'll find our way." There was no self-pity in her voice, only a quiet dignity that struck Wade deeply. This woman had traveled across hundreds of miles, facing hardship and danger, to bring his daughter to him. She asked for nothing in return. "Stay," he found himself saying, "at least until we figure things out." Relief flashed across Hannah's face before she composed herself. "Thank you," she said simply. That night, Wade lay awake long after the house had grown quiet, his mind replaying the events of the past 2 days. The wall he'd built around his heart after Elizabeth's death had developed cracks, allowing emotions he'd long suppressed to seep through: joy at discovering his daughter, guilt for not knowing of her existence, and something else, something unexpected when he thought of Hannah. It wasn't the same as what he'd felt for Elizabeth. That had been a love born of youth and optimism, untested by the harsh realities of frontier life. What he felt when he looked at Hannah was different: a recognition of shared pain, perhaps, or respect for her resilience. Whatever it was, it terrified him. He had sworn never to love again, never to risk that kind of loss. Yet here he was, lying awake thinking of a woman with Elizabeth's eyes and a spirit entirely her own. The days that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Wade would rise early and tend to the essential ranch work, returning to the house for meals where Lily would greet him with increasing enthusiasm. Hannah, meanwhile, had taken over the domestic tasks with quiet efficiency, never asking for assistance, but accepting it graciously when offered. One afternoon, a week after their arrival, Wade returned to the house earlier than usual to find Hannah on her knees in the garden, Lily helping by digging enthusiastically in the soil beside her. The garden was overgrown, Hannah explained as Wade approached. "I thought fresh vegetables would be nice." Wade nodded, noticing how the sunlight caught the auburn highlights in her dark hair. "Elizabeth tried to grow things here," he said, the words coming easier now when he spoke of his late wife. "But she never had much luck with it. The soil's tough." Hannah smiled, brushing dirt from her hands. "My father was a botanist. I grew up with my hands in the earth. Even Boston's soil can be coaxed into cooperation with the right approach." Wade found himself smiling at her determination. "Is that so?" "It is," Hannah replied, a hint of challenge in her voice. "I'll wager by summer's end you'll have more tomatoes than you know what to do with." "I'll hold you to that," Wade said, surprising himself with the implication that she would still be here in summer. Hannah seemed to catch the implication as well, her cheeks coloring slightly as she returned her attention to the garden. Lily, meanwhile, had abandoned her digging to toddle toward Wade, her small face alight with joy. "Papa," she called, arms outstretched. Wade scooped her up, no longer hesitant about showing affection to his daughter. "Hello, little one. Have you been helping your—" He stopped, uncertain how to refer to Hannah. "Aunt Hannah," Hannah supplied, her eyes meeting his. "That's what I've taught her to call me." Wade nodded, grateful for her sensitivity. "Have you been helping Aunt Hannah in the garden?" Lily nodded vigorously, her small hands patting his cheeks. "Dirty," she declared. Wade laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "Yes, you are very dirty. Perhaps we should clean you up before dinner." "I'll take her," Hannah offered, rising to her feet. "You must be tired from your work." "I don't mind," Wade said, already carrying Lily toward the house. "Besides, I'm learning how to be a father. Best to practice, don't you think? The smile Hannah gave him in response was like sunshine breaking through clouds. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Wade found Hannah on the porch, gazing at the stars that blanketed the Texas sky. He hesitated in the doorway, struck by the peaceful image she presented. "They're brighter here than in Boston," Hannah said without turning, somehow sensing his presence. "The stars, I mean." Wade moved to join her at the railing. One of the few advantages of being so far from civilization. Hannah glanced at him, her profile silvered by moonlight. "Do you regret it?" Moving out here away from town, Wade considered the question, realizing no one had asked about his feelings in a very long time. "Sometimes," he admitted. "After Elizabeth died, I couldn't bear the pitying looks, the well-meaning visitors. Out here, it's just me and my thoughts." "And your grief," Hannah added softly. Wade nodded, surprised by her perception. "Yes, that too." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the night sounds of the prairie surrounding them. "Elizabeth loved it here," Wade said finally. "Everyone assumed she was miserable, a Boston lady living in the wilds of Texas. But she thrived on the challenge. She used to say the vastness of the sky made her feel like anything was possible." Hannah smiled, her gaze still on the stars. "That sounds like my sister." "She always did have a romantic streak." "You're not much alike in that way, are you?" Wade observed. Hannah turned to him, surprise evident in her expression. "What makes you say that?" Wade shrugged, struggling to articulate his thoughts. "Elizabeth saw the world as she wished it to be. You seem to see it as it is." "Is that a criticism?" Hannah asked, her voice careful. "No," Wade replied honestly. "It's an observation. Elizabeth's optimism was beautiful, but sometimes—" He trailed off, not wanting to speak ill of the dead. "Sometimes it wasn't practical," Hannah finished for him. "I loved my sister dearly, but yes, we were different in that way. I've always been more practical-minded." Wade nodded, relieved she understood. "It serves you well. You've managed to keep Lily safe and find your way here against considerable odds." Hannah's expression softened at the unexpected praise. "Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you." Their eyes met in the moonlight, and Wade felt something shift between them, a recognition, perhaps, of mutual respect that hadn't been there before. The moment stretched, neither willing to break it, until a coyote's howl in the distance startled them both. "I should check on Lily," Hannah said, stepping back from the railing. Wade nodded, suddenly aware of how close they had been standing. "Of course. Good night, Hannah." She paused at the door, looking back at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Good night, Wade." As she disappeared into the house, Wade remained on the porch, his thoughts in turmoil. For the first time since Elizabeth's death, he found himself thinking about the future not as an endless stretch of solitary days, but as something that might hold possibilities he hadn't dared consider. The thought both terrified and exhilarated him. Spring advanced across the Texas plains, bringing with it wildflowers and increasingly warmer days. Wade found himself spending more time at the house, his interest in ranch work taking a secondary position to watching his daughter grow and change by the day. Lily was walking more confidently now, her vocabulary expanding rapidly, and her personality emerging as a delightful blend of Elizabeth's sweetness and what Hannah called pure Mason stubbornness. Hannah, meanwhile, had transformed the ranch house in subtle ways. The rooms were cleaner, curtains that had been packed away were hung again, and the kitchen garden was beginning to produce early vegetables. She never mentioned how long she and Lily might stay, and Wade never asked, both of them existing in a state of temporary permanence that neither seemed willing to disrupt. Tobias, observing the changes in both the ranch house and its owner, kept his comments to himself. though Wade often caught his foreman watching him with knowing eyes whenever Hannah was nearby. One warm morning in late April, Wade was repairing a chair on the porch when the sound of approaching horses caught his attention. Visitors were rare at the remote ranch, and he instinctively reached for the rifle he kept by the door. "Someone coming?" Hannah asked, appearing in the doorway with Lily on her hip. Wade nodded, his expression grim. "Stay inside," he instructed, moving to the edge of the porch for a better view of the approaching riders. There were 3 of them, moving at a leisurely pace that suggested they weren't in any particular hurry. As they drew closer, Wade relaxed slightly, recognizing the lead rider as Sheriff Dawson from Sweetwater. "Sheriff," Wade called in greeting as the men approached. "What brings you all the way out here?" Sheriff Dawson, a heavy-set man with a bushy mustache, reined in his horse at the foot of the porch steps. "Mason," he nodded. "Sorry to disturb you, but we're looking for someone. Thought you might have seen her." Wade's body tensed, though he kept his expression neutral. "Oh, who might that be?" The sheriff dismounted, the other 2 men following suit. "Young woman, dark hair, traveling with a child. Name of Hannah Parker. She's wanted for questioning in connection with a robbery in Fort Worth." Wade heard a small gasp behind him and turned to see Hannah standing in the doorway, her face pale, Lily clutched tightly to her chest. "Hannah Mason," she corrected quietly, stepping onto the porch. "My name is Hannah Mason." The sheriff's eyebrows rose as he took in her appearance. "You're the woman we're looking for." "I don't know anything about a robbery," Hannah said, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake, madam," one of the other men spoke up, a thin fellow with a deputy's badge pinned to his vest. "A man in Fort Worth was robbed at gunpoint. Says a woman matching your description took his money after luring him to a hotel room. When he reported it, the hotel clerk confirmed a woman with a baby had been staying there but left sudden like that same night." Wade moved to stand beside Hannah, his protective instinct flaring. "That's ridiculous. Hannah wouldn't rob anyone." The sheriff studied Wade's face, then looked back at Hannah. "Mason, you related to Wade here." Before Hannah could respond, Wade spoke firmly. "She's my sister-in-law." "Elizabeth's sister. And this," he added, gesturing to Lily, "is my daughter." The sheriff's expression changed to one of surprise, then understanding. "I see. Didn't know Elizabeth had a sister, or that you had a child, Mason." "It's a long story," Wade said shortly. "But I can vouch for Hannah's character. She's been here for weeks now, helping me with my daughter." The 3rd man, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. He was expensively dressed for the frontier, with a tailored suit and polished boots. "The woman stole $300 from me," he said, his voice carrying a hint of an Eastern accent. "I'd like it back." Hannah's eyes widened. "Mr. Henderson," she breathed, recognition and fear crossing her face. Wade glanced between them, noting the man's smug expression and Hannah's obvious distress. "You know this man?" Hannah nodded slowly. "He offered to escort Lily and me to Sweetwater when we were stranded in Fort Worth. He said he knew where to find you." "And she repaid my kindness by drugging my whiskey and stealing my money," Henderson cut in, his voice hard. "After I paid for her room, her meals, everything." "That's not true," Hannah protested, though her voice trembled slightly. "He tried to force himself on me. I ran because I was afraid for Lily." Wade's jaw tightened as the pieces fell into place. This was the man Hannah had alluded to when she first arrived, the gentleman whose intentions had been less than honorable. "Sheriff," Wade said, his voice dangerously calm, "I suggest you take a good look at the kind of man making these accusations." Sheriff Dawson frowned, glancing between Henderson and Hannah. "Mr. Henderson here is a businessman from St. Louis." Says he was in Fort Worth on legitimate business when he was robbed. And I'm sure he'll explain what kind of legitimate business involves pressuring a woman traveling alone with a child, Wade replied, his hand moving instinctively to the gun at his hip. The sheriff noticed the movement and raised a placating hand. Now, let's all stay calm here. No need for things to get heated. Henderson stepped forward, his face flushing with anger. I want my money and I want this woman arrested. She's a thief and a liar. Wade moved between Henderson and Hannah, his expression cold. Watch your tongue when speaking about my family, Henderson. The tension in the air was palpable as the two men faced each other. Lily, sensing the hostility, began to whimper, burying her face against Hannah's shoulder. Sheriff, Hannah said, her voice steadier now, I did take money from Mr. Henderson. $40, not $300. It was the same amount he had paid for our room and meals, which he had insisted was a loan until we found Wade, when he tried to collect. In ways I hadn't agreed to, I took back only what would get Lily and me safely away from him. Sheriff Dawson scratched his chin thoughtfully. That sounds like a different story than the one I heard. She's lying, Henderson snarled. She took $300. I want it back and I want her punished. I don't have $300, Hannah replied. I barely had enough to make it here after paying for food and shelter along the way. Wade had heard enough. Sheriff, he said firmly, whatever happened between them, it's clear there are two sides to this story. Hannah is here now with her family. She's not going anywhere. Are you refusing to hand her over to the law, Mason? The sheriff asked, his hand moving to rest on his own weapon. Wade stood his ground. I'm saying there's no need for her to be handed over anywhere. If charges need to be filed, they can be addressed in Sweetwater with proper representation. In the meantime, she stays here with her niece. The standoff continued for several tense moments, neither side willing to back down. Finally, the sheriff sighed, removing his hand from his gun. All right, Mason. I've known you a long time and you've always been an honest man. If you're vouching for her, I'm willing to let this be settled civilly. He turned to Henderson. Sir, it seems we have a dispute over the facts. I suggest we return to Sweetwater and consult with the judge about how to proceed. Henderson's face contorted with rage. This is outrageous. I demand justice. And you'll get it, the sheriff assured him, through proper channels. Now let's not cause any more distress to the little one. He nodded toward Lily, who was still clinging fearfully to Hannah. Henderson glared at Wade, then at Hannah. This isn't over, he promised before turning and stalking back to his horse. The sheriff gave Wade a meaningful look. I'll be back in a few days, once I've sorted this out. Keep her here until then. Wade nodded, his posture relaxing slightly as the men mounted their horses and rode away. Only when they were out of sight did he turn to Hannah, who was trembling visibly now that the immediate danger had passed. You should have told me, he said quietly. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, afraid you'd send us away. I didn't steal from him, Wade, not really. I just took what I needed to get away safely. Wade's expression softened as he reached out to brush a tear from her cheek. I believe you, Hannah, but from now on, no more secrets between us. We face things together. Hannah looked up at him, hope and gratitude mingling in her gaze. Together, Wade nodded, his hand moving to rest gently on Lily's back. Together, you and Lily are my family now, and I protect my family. The words, spoken without premeditation, hung in the air between them. Wade watched as Hannah processed them, her expression shifting from surprise to a cautious joy that made his heart constrict in his chest. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Wade's only response was to draw her and Lily into his arms, a silent promise of protection that felt more natural than anything had in years. Later that evening, After Lily was asleep, Wade found Hannah in the kitchen, absently stirring a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Her expression was distant, troubled. "He'll be back," she said without looking up as Wade entered. "Henderson, he's not the type to let things go." Wade sat across from her, his expression serious. "Then we'll be ready for him." Hannah finally met his gaze. "I'm sorry for bringing this trouble to your door, Wade. You've been nothing but kind, and I've repaid you with—" "Stop," Wade interrupted gently. "You brought my daughter to me, Hannah. There's nothing you could ever do that wouldn't be outweighed by that gift." Hannah's expression softened. "She loves you already. It's remarkable how quickly she's bonded with you." "Children are resilient," Wade observed. "More so than adults sometimes." Hannah nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. "I never thanked you properly for taking us in, for believing me." "You don't need to thank me for that," Wade replied. "But there is something I need to know now that Henderson has found you." Hannah tensed slightly. "What's that? Were you planning to stay?" Wade asked, the question that had been circling his mind for weeks finally spoken aloud. "Before this happened, were you planning to remain here with Lily? Or was this just a temporary stop before taking her somewhere else?" Hannah's eyes widened slightly at the directness of the question. I didn't have a plan beyond finding you," she admitted. "I wanted Lily to know her father." "Beyond that?" She trailed off, shrugging helplessly. "And now," Wade pressed, needing to hear her answer. Hannah met his gaze steadily. "Now I want to stay if you'll have us. Lily is happy here. She's thriving, and you—" She hesitated, a blush coloring her cheeks. "You're a good father, Wade. She deserves to grow up knowing you." "And what about you?" Wade asked, his voice dropping lower. "What do you deserve, Hannah?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. Hannah's breath caught visibly, her eyes searching his face. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I haven't thought much about what I deserve, only about what Lily needs." Wade reached across the table, covering her hand with his own. "Maybe it's time you did." Before Hannah could respond, a sharp knock at the door startled them both. Wade rose quickly, his hand moving to the gun at his hip. "Stay here," he instructed, moving cautiously to the front door. When he opened it, he found Tobias standing on the porch, his expression grim. "Sorry to disturb you so late," the foreman said. "But I thought you should know there's talk in town about Henderson filing formal charges against Miss Hannah. Sheriff's trying to hold him off, but the man's got influence." Wade nodded, unsurprised. "I figured as much. Come in, Tobias. We need to discuss this." The three adults gathered around the kitchen table, speaking in low voices to avoid waking Lily. Tobias explained what he'd heard in town, that Henderson was claiming Hannah had not only robbed him, but had attempted to extort money by threatening to accuse him of improper advances. "It's his word against mine," Hannah said quietly. "And he's a wealthy businessman while I'm just a woman traveling alone with a child." "You're not alone anymore," Wade reminded her. "And we have resources he might not expect." Tobias nodded in agreement. "The Masons have been in this territory for decades. Your father helped half the ranchers around here get established, Wade. People remember that." "We need to get ahead of this," Wade said thoughtfully. "Henderson is counting on the law moving slowly and Hannah having no support. We need to change the equation." The discussion continued late into the night, the three of them formulating a plan to counter Henderson's accusations. By the time Tobias left, promising to spread the word among trusted friends in town, Wade felt a cautious optimism. "You think it will work?" Hannah asked as they stood on the porch, watching Tobias ride away. Wade turned to her, taking in her worried expression in the moonlight. "It has to," he said simply. "I'm not losing you and Lily now." The words, spoken with such fierce determination, caused Hannah's eyes to widen. "Wade," she began, her voice uncertain. He stepped closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "I mean it, Hannah. These past weeks, having you and Lily here, it's like the ranch has come alive again. Like I've come alive again." Hannah's breath caught as Wade reached up to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. "I never expected this," she whispered. "When I set out to find you, I only thought of Lily, of her need for a father." "And now?" Wade asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Now I think of us," Hannah admitted, her eyes shining in the moonlight, "of what we could be together. But I'm afraid, Wade, afraid of what Henderson might do, afraid of replacing Elizabeth in your heart." Wade shook his head, his hand cupping her cheek. "You couldn't replace Elizabeth, Hannah. No one could. She was my first love, the mother of my child. But that doesn't mean there isn't room in my heart for something new, something different but just as real." Hannah leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. "I've tried not to feel this way," she confessed. "It seemed wrong somehow to care for my sister's husband. Elizabeth would want us to be happy," Wade said softly. "She would want Lily to have a family, a mother who loves her as fiercely as you do." Hannah's eyes flew open, searching his face. "A mother?" Wade nodded, suddenly certain of what he wanted. "Stay, Hannah, not just for Lily but for yourself. For us. Let's build something together, something that honors Elizabeth's memory but isn't bound by grief." Tears welled in Hannah's eyes as she placed her hand over his where it rested on her cheek. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll stay." Wade drew her closer, his heart thundering in his chest. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When Hannah responded, her arms winding around his neck, the kiss deepened, becoming a promise neither had expected to make again. When they finally parted, both breathless, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "We'll face Henderson together," he promised, "and whatever comes after." Hannah nodded, a small smile curving her lips. "Together," she agreed, the word no longer a hope but a certainty. The following days brought a flurry of activity to the ranch. True to his word, Tobias had rallied support among the longtime residents of the area. Several neighboring ranchers rode out to offer their assistance, many remembering Wade's father and expressing delight at discovering Wade had a daughter. "Never thought I'd see the day," old Jim Harper chuckled, his weathered face creasing into a smile as he watched Lily playing in the yard. "Mason stock continuing. Your pa would be proud." Wade, who had once avoided all mention of family and future, found himself accepting such comments with a quiet pride that surprised him. The change in him was not lost on those who had known him before Elizabeth's death, and many exchanged knowing glances when they saw how he looked at Hannah. For her part, Hannah blossomed under the acceptance of the community, her natural warmth and practicality winning over even the most skeptical of the frontier women who came to call. She never directly mentioned her relationship with Wade, but there was a new confidence in her manner, a sense of belonging that hadn't been there before. True to Sheriff Dawson's prediction, Henderson did indeed press his case. A formal complaint was filed in Sweetwater, and the sheriff rode out to inform them that Hannah would need to appear before the judge the following week. "Henderson's making quite a fuss," the sheriff reported, accepting a cup of coffee from Hannah with a nod of thanks. "Got himself a lawyer from Dallas, all very official." "And what do you think, Sheriff?" Wade asked, seated at the table with Lily on his knee. Sheriff Dawson's mustache twitched as he sipped his coffee. "Officially, I'm bound to investigate all claims made. Unofficially." He glanced at Hannah, his expression softening. "Let's just say Mr. Henderson's reputation preceded him to Sweetwater. Seems he's had similar misunderstandings with ladies in other towns." Hannah's eyes widened. "There are others," the sheriff nodded grimly. "At least two that we know of." Unfortunately, none were willing to come forward officially. Too afraid of the consequences, I reckon. Wade's jaw tightened. So he's done this before. Appears so, the sheriff confirmed. But without witnesses willing to testify, it's still his word against Miss Hannah's. Wade exchanged a glance with Hannah, a silent communication passing between them. "We'll be there," he assured the sheriff, "and we won't be alone." After the sheriff departed, Wade and Hannah discussed their strategy, both aware that the upcoming hearing would determine not just Hannah's fate but the future of their fledgling family. "I'm afraid," Hannah admitted that night as they sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge. "Not just of Henderson, but of what people will think when they realize how I feel about you. Elizabeth has only been gone 3 years. Wade took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. 3 years feels like a lifetime when you're living it alone, he said quietly. But I understand your concern. People might talk. They already are, Hannah pointed out. I've seen the looks, heard the whispers when we went to town yesterday. Wade nodded, acknowledging the truth of her words. The small community was inevitably curious about the woman living at Wade Mason's ranch, and speculation ran rampant despite their discretion. "Let them talk," he said finally. "What matters is what's true and what's right for Lily." Hannah squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his certainty. "And what do you think is right for her?" Wade turned to face her fully, his expression serious in the moonlight. "I think she deserves 2 parents who love her, a stable home, a family." "A family," Hannah repeated softly, the word both thrilling and terrifying. "Wade, are you saying—" "I'm saying I love you, Hannah," Wade interrupted, the declaration startling in its simplicity. "I didn't expect to. God knows I fought against it, but there it is. I love you and I want you to be my wife, Lily's mother in every way that matters." Hannah's breath caught, her eyes filling with tears. "But Elizabeth would want this," Wade finished for her. "She would want Lily to have a mother who loves her. She would want me to find happiness again." Hannah searched his face, finding only sincerity in his gaze. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have since that first night when you took us in despite your own pain." Wade raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Then marry me. Let's face Henderson and whatever comes after as husband and wife." "Yes," Hannah answered without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you, Wade Mason." The judge's chambers in Sweetwater were crowded the following week as Hannah's hearing commenced. Word had spread throughout the county, and it seemed everyone had an opinion on the matter. Henderson sat at one table with his expensive lawyer, looking smug and confident. Hannah sat at the other with Wade beside her, her back straight despite her nervousness. Judge Wilson, a stern-faced man with a reputation for fairness, called the room to order. "We're here to determine if there's sufficient evidence to proceed with charges against Miss Hannah Parker, also known as Hannah Mason, for the alleged theft of $300 from Mr. George Henderson." Henderson's lawyer rose, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose. "Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman from St. Louis who was viciously robbed after extending Christian charity to the accused and her child. We have his sworn statement detailing the events, and we demand justice." The judge nodded, then turned to Hannah. "And your response to these allegations, Miss Parker?" Before Hannah could speak, Wade stood. "Your Honor, if I may, there's a matter that should be addressed before these proceedings continue." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And you are Wade Mason, Your Honor. I'm Hannah's husband." A murmur swept through the crowded room. Hannah looked up at Wade in surprise. They had planned to marry after the hearing, not wanting to appear as though they were rushing into marriage solely to influence the proceedings. Wade continued, his voice steady. "We were married yesterday by Reverend Johnson. I have the certificate here." He produced a document from his pocket, handing it to the sheriff to pass to the judge. Judge Wilson examined the paper, his expression unreadable. "I see. And why is this relevant to the matter at hand, Mr. Mason?" "Because as her husband, I stand by my wife's account of events," Wade replied firmly. "And because I believe Mr. Henderson's accusations are motivated not by a desire for justice, but by vengeance against a woman who refused his immoral advances." Henderson shot to his feet. "That's a lie." "The woman is a thief and a—" "Silence," the judge commanded, banging his gavel. "Mr. Henderson, you will have your opportunity to speak." He turned back to Wade. "Continue, Mr. Mason." Wade nodded, his hand resting supportively on Hannah's shoulder. "Your Honor, my wife admits to taking $40 from Mr. Henderson, the exact amount he had spent on room and board while offering to escort her to Sweetwater. She took this money only after he attempted to force himself upon her, putting both her and my daughter at risk." "Preposterous." Henderson's lawyer interjected. "My client is a gentleman of standing. The very idea is not as preposterous as you might think," came a new voice from the back of the room. All heads turned to see a well-dressed woman standing in the doorway, her expression resolute despite her obvious discomfort at being the center of attention. "And who might you be, madam?" the judge asked, frowning at the interruption. "My name is Margaret Wilkes, Your Honor. I'm from Dallas." She moved forward, her chin held high. "2 years ago, Mr. Henderson offered to escort me to visit my sister in St. Louis. He behaved exactly as Mrs. Mason has described. When I refused his advances, he accused me of stealing from him." The room erupted in whispers. Henderson's face flushed dark with anger. "This is a setup," he shouted. "These women are conspiring against me." "Order," the judge commanded, banging his gavel again. He turned to Margaret Wilkes. "Madam, are you willing to testify under oath to these allegations?" "I am, Your Honor," she replied steadily, "and I'm not alone." As if on cue, another woman rose from the audience, younger, plainly dressed, but with the same determined expression. "I'm Sarah Collins from Fort Worth," she announced. "Mr. Henderson did the same to me last year. When I escaped him, he had me fired from my position as a schoolteacher by spreading lies about my character." Judge Wilson's expression darkened as he surveyed the room. "It seems, Mr. Henderson, that your reputation has preceded you." Henderson's lawyer leaned close to his client, whispering urgently, but Henderson shoved him away. "This is absurd. These women are lying." "They're careful, Mr. Henderson," the judge warned. "You're very close to contempt." For the next hour, the judge heard testimony from Margaret, Sarah, and finally Hannah, each recounting similar experiences with Henderson. As the pattern became clear, the atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. Where there had been whispers about Hannah's character, there were now glares directed at Henderson. Finally, Judge Wilson removed his spectacles, rubbing the bridge of his nose tiredly. "I've heard enough," he declared. "The charge against Mrs. Mason is dismissed, Mr. Henderson. Given the testimony presented today, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for potential charges against you for false accusation and—" He paused, his expression severe. "Other possible offenses that may come to light upon further investigation." Henderson leapt to his feet, his face contorted with rage. "You can't do this. I demand—" "You are in no position to demand anything," the judge cut him off coldly. "Sheriff, please escort Mr. Henderson from my courtroom. He is to remain in Sweetwater until the district attorney has reviewed this case." As the sheriff moved to comply, Henderson's gaze locked on Hannah, his eyes burning with hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You'll regret this, all of you." Wade stepped forward, placing himself between Henderson and Hannah. "No, it is over," he said quietly, his voice carrying in the suddenly silent room. "You'll never threaten my wife or any other woman again. If you try, you'll answer to me." The conviction in Wade's voice caused even Henderson to falter. With a final glare, he allowed the sheriff to lead him away. Outside the courthouse, Hannah was surrounded by well-wishers, including Margaret and Sarah, who had traveled so far to support a woman they'd never met, united by their shared experiences. Wade stood slightly apart, watching with pride as his wife accepted their congratulations with grace. "You did good, son," came a gruff voice beside him. Wade turned to find old Jim Harper standing there, his weathered face creased in a smile. "Your pa would have been proud." Wade nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "Thank you, Jim." "She's a fine woman," Jim continued, nodding toward Hannah. "Got spirit, like your Elizabeth did, but in her own way." "Yes," Wade agreed, watching as Hannah laughed at something one of the women said, her face alight with relief and joy. "In her own way." As the crowd began to disperse, Hannah made her way to Wade's side, slipping her hand into his. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Wade squeezed her hand. "No need for thanks between husband and wife." Hannah's smile widened at the words. "Husband and wife," she repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "I still can't believe Reverend Johnson agreed to marry us so quickly." "He's known me since I was a boy," Wade explained, "and I think he could see what we mean to each other." Hannah's expression grew serious. "I'll be a good wife to you, Wade, and a good mother to Lily." "I know you will," Wade replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You already are." As they walked toward the wagon where Tobias waited with Lily, Hannah suddenly stopped, her expression troubled. "What about Henderson? His threat?" Wade's jaw tightened briefly before he forced himself to relax. "Henderson will face justice. And if he doesn't, if he somehow escapes it, we'll be ready. But I won't let fear of him shadow our happiness." Hannah searched his face, drawing strength from his certainty. "You're right. We've come too far to let fear guide us now." Wade smiled, pulling her close for a brief, tender kiss that drew a few good-natured whistles from onlookers. "Let's go home, Mrs. Mason." As summer turned to fall and fall to winter, the Mason ranch flourished under the care of its expanded family. Hannah's garden had indeed produced more tomatoes than they could use, much to Wade's amused delight. Lily grew stronger and more talkative by the day, her laughter filling the once silent house with joy. Henderson, facing multiple accusations from women emboldened by Hannah's stand, had fled Sweetwater before the district attorney could formally charge him. Rumors placed him in Mexico, but Wade remained vigilant, never forgetting the man's threat. Still, as the months passed without incident, the shadow of Henderson's menace receded, allowing the new family to focus on building their life together. One cold December evening, Wade returned from checking the cattle to find Hannah sitting by the fire, her hands resting on her slightly rounded belly. She was 4 months along now, their second child conceived on their wedding night, by Wade's reckoning growing steadily within her. "Everything all right?" he asked, hanging his coat by the door and moving to join her. Hannah smiled, that same smile that had first begun to thaw his frozen heart. "Perfect. Lily's asleep, the baby's kicking, and my husband is home safe." Wade knelt beside her chair, placing his hand over hers on her belly. "I never thought I'd have this again," he admitted quietly. "A family, hope for the future." Hannah leaned forward to press a kiss to his forehead. "Neither did I, after losing my parents, then Elizabeth. I thought I was destined to be alone." Wade shook his head, rising to sit on the arm of her chair. "Not alone. Not anymore." They sat in companionable silence, watching the fire cast its warm glow around the room that had once seemed so empty to Wade. On the mantel, A small portrait of Elizabeth stood alongside a newer photograph of Wade, Hannah, and Lily, past and present honored equally. "I've been thinking," Hannah said after a while, her voice thoughtful. "A dangerous pastime," Wade teased, earning a playful swat on his arm. "I'm serious," Hannah insisted, though her eyes danced with amusement. "I've been thinking about names for the baby. If it's a girl, I'd like to call her Elizabeth." Wade's breath caught, his eyes moving to the portrait on the mantel. "Elizabeth," he repeated softly. Hannah watched his face carefully. "Unless you think it would be too painful, I just thought. It would be a way to honor her memory, to acknowledge her place in our lives." Wade turned back to his wife, his eyes shining with emotion. "I think it's perfect," he said, his voice rough. "And if it's a boy?" Hannah smiled, relief evident in her expression. "I was thinking William, after your father. William Mason has a strong sound to it, don't you think?" Wade nodded, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of her choices. "Either way, the child will have a name to be proud of." As if in agreement, the baby kicked against Hannah's palm, causing them both to laugh. "I think he or she approves," Hannah said, her eyes bright with happiness. Wade pulled her gently to her feet and into his arms. "I love you, Hannah Mason," he murmured against her hair. "More than I ever thought possible." Hannah tilted her face up to his, her green eyes reflecting the firelight. "And I love you, Wade Mason. Today, tomorrow, and all the days after." As their lips met in a tender kiss, Wade knew with certainty that the vow he'd made years ago to never love again had been broken in the most beautiful way possible. Through the grief and loss, through the unexpected second chances, he had found his way back to love. Different from before, but no less real, no less profound. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the Texas landscape in a blanket of white. Inside, in the warmth of their home, Wade and Hannah Mason held each other close, the future stretching before them like an unwritten story, one they would write together, one day at a time. On a bright spring morning 5 years later, Wade stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching as Hannah supervised their growing brood in the garden. Lily, now 8, was carefully showing her younger sister Elizabeth how to plant carrot seeds. 3-year-old William toddled behind them, more interested in the dirt than the planting, while baby Rose slept peacefully in a basket in the shade. "Papa," Lily called, spotting him. "Come see what we planted," Wade smiled, making his way down the steps toward his family. As he approached, Hannah straightened, brushing dirt from her hands and offering him that same smile that never failed to warm his heart. "Inspecting our work," she teased, her green eyes dancing with happiness. Wade wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close for a quick kiss. "Just admiring the view," he replied, surveying the thriving garden, the playing children, and the woman who had brought light back into his life. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Wade and Hannah sat on the porch as they often did, watching the stars emerge in the vast Texas sky. "I rode by the North Ridge today," Wade said quietly. "The wildflowers are blooming on Elizabeth's grave." Hannah leaned her head against his shoulder. "We should take the children there tomorrow. Lily was asking about her birth mother again." Wade nodded, grateful as always for Hannah's understanding. They had never hidden the truth from Lily, ensuring that Elizabeth remained a beloved presence in their family story. "I think she would be happy," Wade said after a moment, "seeing what we've built here, the family we've created." Hannah squeezed his hand. "I think so too." As the night deepened around them, Wade Mason reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from the depths of grief to the heights of joy, from solitude to the rich tapestry of family life. The cowboy who had buried his wife and sworn off love had found his heart again when Hannah knocked on his door with a baby in her arms. Life, Wade had learned, was a series of endings and beginnings, of losses and discoveries. And sometimes, if you were lucky enough, love found you not just once, but twice in a lifetime. "Come to bed, husband," Hannah said softly, rising and holding out her hand. Wade took it, following her into their home, the home they had built together, filled with laughter and love and the promise of all the years to come.